Tethered Nation. I'm sure you've heard mention of Tethered Nation. You're probably wondering, what the hell is this nation you speak of? Well, I'm glad that you asked. If you are looking for an elevated hunting system that is light, mobile, customizable with a MOLLE attachment system, and above all else is super ridiculously safe, then you need to check out the Tethered Mantis Saddle and Predator platform. I took the plunge last year in saddle hunting, and I'm using both the Mantis Saddle and Predator platform and haven't looked back since. If you think being more mobile or lighter will help you in the deer woods, go to tetherednation.com. That's TETHRDNATION.com and learn more about all their products today. Hello and welcome to the Truth from Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 126. And today I'm joined by the CEO of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Land Tawney. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Hope everyone is doing good out there. Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you had a chance to enjoy a little bit of this nice weather we've been having. This past weekend was awesome. I don't really have a memory of a better weekend in recent memory, with just like the nice temperatures, low humidity. It was almost perfect weather for this time of year. So I hope all you out there listening had a chance to get out and do some deer work, whether it was hanging trail cameras or whether it was getting that food plot in that finally dried out, or maybe hanging some sets or prepping some trees or something. But I hope you had a chance to get out and enjoy it. My wife and I spent the entire weekend outdoors, and rightfully so. With the coffee company, with the Skull Brew coffee company that we have. I think I mentioned in the past that we are a sponsor of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, the Pennsylvania chapter, of course. And Chris Hennessy, a buddy of ours, he's been on the show before, invited us to Muster in the Mountains, which was the first and largest East Coast gathering for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I'm sure all you guys out there, listening are aware that, BHA, of course, does their rendezvous out west, which is to, a lot of fanfare, super cool event. And so this was an event that they were throwing on the East Coast, which is pretty significant, given that this, I think the perception is that this is very much more a Western kind of focused organization, or at least its membership focus is out west. So it was a big deal for it to have this happen on the East Coast, and in Pennsylvania specifically, I think says a lot. I think the number that I heard actually is that I want to say Pennsylvania is the second biggest chapter in Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Second, I believe, only to Montana. So PA has the number that I was told this past weekend was around 1,500 members in the Pennsylvania chapter. And just to give you a little comparison, Montana has about 2,500. So 1,000 behind, which is, a little bit of a gap. But if you think about, where we were and where we are now, so just to give you an example, roughly a year ago, Pennsylvania's chapter stood at about 300. And this year we are at 15. So that's a 5X increase in just 1 year. So that speaks volumes to the work that the folks at the PA chapter are doing. And so this event was kind of, I think, representative of how much the East Coast has grown and the awareness that has been, kind of provided to the issues, surrounding conservation, public lands, public access, etc., here in the eastern part of the country, which is just super rad. But the event was awesome. They did a killer job setting it up. And a lot of cool games and stuff like that. But the big takeaway for me really was, of course, there was a lot of good hunting talk and stuff like that. And, of course, ran into buddies, like my buddy, Bo Martonic, who he actually is on this podcast with me and was, with me and talking to Land. So we decided to tackle some things together this weekend. But it was making new friends. It was people who maybe I'd followed on Instagram but never had a chance to meet or didn't get a chance to run into at ATA or whatever, or just people from, random places that you don't even know that showed up. I mean, there was people that were showing up from Kentucky, the Carolinas, New Hampshire. I think there was some folks from Virginia, of course, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Delaware was all well represented. But I was really kind of surprised as to how far-reaching this event was. Want to make mention, I had followed her on Instagram for a while. Her and her her significant other. So, Allie and Nick from Allie Outdoors and Worn and Weathered, got to hang out with them. I don't know that I could meet two cooler people and just two folks who are more fun to hang out with that are just ate up with the outdoors. So it was super cool to get to know them and hang out with them. And then this other fellow, so his name's Toriot. And if you don't follow him, you should check him out on Instagram. He messaged me during the course of the week and had asked me if I was going to be at the event and wanted to just kind of connect and chat. And so was happy to do it. He stopped by the coffee tent and we were just talking hunting strategies and BS, and super cool dude. Had a great time talking to him. But what I didn't realize, in just kind of our casual conversation online and stuff like that is that this dude is a serious knife builder. And so we kind of talked about that a little bit and, a little foreshadowing. Hopefully there'll be a podcast in the near future talking to him. But this is just a type of people that were there. We got to talk and he showed me some of his knives, and then he actually gave me one of the custom knives that he made, which is a beautiful knife. And you can see it on my Instagram page. His company name, for anyone who wants to check it out, is called Sacred Bear Knives. You can follow them on Instagram and check it out. But it was just that kind of brotherhood and camaraderie that everyone was kind of working toward during the whole weekend. And it didn't matter where you were from or what your background was or whatever the case might be. Everyone was there for the same reason, which was to just kind of have a weekend of sharing outdoor experiences, regardless of where you came from or what your background is, which was super cool. The other kind of next level thing was the amount of kids that was there, or that were there. Our age group or our generation, if you will, is going to do so much, and hopefully we're charged with setting a solid foundation for the next group of hunters and anglers that come behind us to kind of take the mantle and move it even further forward. But I think we're kind of here to lay the foundation. And what really was kind of nice to see, and it might even go as far as to say is that, it warmed the heart a little bit, was to see the number of kids that were there just enjoying the outdoors. Like there was a kid, it was, they were from Kentucky. I think they were from Kentucky. There was a wild game cook-off, and their dad brought them in, and they brought the one boy killed his first deer this year and saved his back straps since he killed his deer because he wanted to come do this cook-off, and brought his back straps to this event and did a wild game cook-off, and ended up winning the cook-off. And so just to think about the story that he has at such a young age of taking this animal and then doing something super cool with it with his dad, making a memory, and then sharing it with, the several hundred people that were there to kind of witness him, almost enter into the outdoors in a different way. Not just as a hunter, but, as an outdoorsman and as a conservationist. And that was just super cool to see. One kid's a pretty good shot. He actually shot me in the neck with a Nerf gun. Had to teach him maybe to, want to aim a little lower, maybe put it behind the front shoulder, and it might be a better shot. But it was just super cool to see all the kids. The other takeaway was like, if you're out there and you have kids, don't buy them any toys. Just give them a pile of dirt and they'll play for days, because every kid played in the gravel. Even if they had toys, they kind of gravitated toward the gravel. But it was just a super cool event. I'm already looking forward to doing it next year. Hopefully it's something that happens annually. I can't believe that they wouldn't do it annually. Just because I think it went off without a hitch. And I think that, just as it goes forward year over year, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. And I could see a day when the East Coast, when the Muster in the Mountains or whatever it ends up being called, going forward, that it rivals the rendezvous out west. But today's show is super cool. Tawney is, of course, the leader of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and Bo and I were able to steal him for a little while. This is a short podcast because, as you can imagine, at these types of events, he's in high demand to talk to folks and make some presentations and stuff like that. And that was the case. We were able to steal him for about 25 to 30 minutes in chat. But the one thing I want to mention, was, as we were packing up on Sunday morning, my wife and I showed up to serve coffee to everyone who was packing up their gear, their tents and stuff like that. And getting out of there, we figured everyone would probably need to be caffeinated. And Land was just kind of walking around, talking to everyone, talking to the volunteers, talking to, his staff from the different chapters, and, showing, of course, gratitude to the hard work that they've done, and just enjoying just kind of taking it all in to a degree. And he stopped over to talk to Megan and I, and we just kind of started BSing a little bit. And the one thing that kind of struck me, and I didn't think about it until he mentioned it, which was, I can't recall there being a single quote unquote asshole in the group the entire weekend. You always get that 10% asshole factor. Doesn't matter where you go. You could be in church and you're going to have 10% of the people in the church are assholes. You can go to a concert and it could be the calmest concert you've ever been to. It could be a James Taylor concert. You're going to have 10% of the people in the audience are going to be assholes, going to get drunk and ruin someone's time. It just goes without fail, right? It's just kind of like human nature. This is probably the first time that I can remember where I went somewhere and there wasn't a single problem. You didn't hear a single person say an even slightly negative remark about anyone or anything at all. Period. Full stop. Which just to me, when you get a group of people together and there was, there were drinks involved, there was a beer vendor there, everyone was socially lubricated as much as they wanted to be or needed to be. And there was just not a single issue. And that really kind of struck me. And then whenever Land came over and was talking to us as we were packing up, he said something that kind of, I guess, harkened, back to that thought, which was he had a guy come up to him that was from New Hampshire. And he's not a hunter. He's a backpacker. Never hunted a day in his life. And he, walked up and was talking to Land, and Land asked him about something or whatever. And he had mentioned that he was a backpacker. And this, I think, was unsolicited. And he said, I came here really kind of unsure, first off, whether he was going to go or not. Number two, when he got there, he was unsure how he was going to be greeted, considering he's not a hunter, and was anticipating that all conversations during the course of the weekend was going to be geared around hunting and angling, right? Of which he does neither. And so he was kind of thinking that when he got there, he was like, I'm probably going to, immediately have to kind of pull out. It's going to be like, show your hunter, tough guy card at the entrance before you enter type of thing. So people know, who and what you are and how you rate against everybody else. And he said to his surprise, not a single person there asked him if he hunted or fished and or why he was there, which to me is really the whole point of the stuff that we talk about, the stuff that we preach, and the stuff that Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is doing, and exactly what they stand for. It's not about, the who you are or who you think you are. It's about doing the work and putting forth the ideas and the right attitudes that are going to benefit not us. Screw us as hunters. It's about the wildlife, and it's about the land. It's about the habitat. It's about conserving those things. And I think this weekend kind of brought that to light, that it wasn't about the people that were there. It was, but it was about the group that was there. It was about the community. And that was really kind of my takeaway from the weekend. So I'm super excited to jump in to this podcast and share the conversation with you that Bo and I were able to have with Land Tawney. But before we do that, before we kick this episode off, I just wanted to make mention once again that our friends at Exodus have Velvet Fest going on, and it lasts roughly a month. It's going to run till July 12th. And if you're not familiar with what Velvet Fest is, we consider it the official start to deer season, and Exodus helps us get this ball rolling. So all month, they're going to give out prizes. They've been giving out prizes for the past 2 weeks for anyone who uses the hashtag Velvet Fest in social media, showing whatever you're getting into with your whitetail adventures. So whether you're doing food plots, shooting your bow, trimming lanes, whatever it is, post it on social, hashtag Velvet Fest will get you entered. Also, if you're in the market for a trail camera, hashtag Velvet Fest is the perfect opportunity to get ready for the season. Every single camera order comes with a gift ranging from a Wicked Tree Gear handsaw, Skull Brew coffee, deer aging kit, and or Exodus merch. Also, every single camera or order comes with a random prize card that you'll get to scratch off and reveal a prize. It's kind of like a lottery scratch off, and they've been giving away some pretty killer prizes. So with this celebration, you might be wondering what exactly are they giving away as prizes in general when they do the drawings from when you tag your social posts with hashtag VelvetFest. Well, they've already given away a Maven rifle scope. They've already given away an Exodus trail camera package. And what is coming up in week 3 and week 4 is a tethered package, which you're not going to want to miss, and an Exodus render package, which you're also not going to miss. because it's their new cell camera that's coming out, which is kick-ass. You'll automatically be entered with any purchase on the website for the grand prize. There's a lot to this campaign, so you just want to head over to their website, which is exodusoutdoorgear.com, and sign up for their newsletter, because they'll be giving out a lot of information, announcing winners, etc., through their newsletter. And they'll also have a Velvet Fest calendar and highlights with all the details there, so you'll be able to kind of see what the coming weeks will have to offer. So if you're not familiar with Exodus, though, which I'd be hard pressed to think that you're not if you're listening to this podcast, but over the last 4 years, they've consistently shown that they build kick-ass cameras. They have a 5-year theft policy. They have the camera's backed by a 5-year warranty. That's right, 5 years, half a decade that you're not going to have to worry about if your camera shits out or gets stolen. So be sure to take part of Velvet Fest celebration, and be sure to tag Exodus in any of your posts, because our buddies at Exodus will want to see what you got going on for the prep of deer season. So with that, let's go ahead and get to the conversation with Tawney. All right, folks, welcome back. You are listening to a unique episode of this podcast. This is a co-brand podcast with myself, Clint, from Truth from the Stand, and I have my buddy Bo Martonic from East Meets West.
Yeah, it's going to be a good episode, and a couple of them here. We're going to kind of co-brand here, kind of collaborating and doing some recording here, so I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, we're showing a little unity in the hunting space here, a little unity.
Let's get more of that.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
How about it?
So those of you out there listening might be familiar with the gentleman's voice who just chimed in. We are at the Muster in the Mountains events for BHA. This is our East Coast event, and we're joined by none other than Tawney. How's it going, man?
Dude, I'm having a great time. I love being here, have all these people come in. We have people like from Kentucky, people from New York, people from Ohio. Like all these people are coming in, and the party's just starting, so I'm excited for today.
Yeah, I was surprised with the different, because, coming into this, I wasn't sure how widespread it was going to be. I was thinking like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, might get a few West Virginians, maybe a couple Ohioans. Is that even, or a Buckeye maybe? Is a better way to phrase it?
It
is. Yeah, English words, they mean things. But I was surprised. Like you said, I've seen people from Kentucky and Virginia, which is, it's super cool. It just kind of shows the growth that we've had on the East Coast and how people are getting engaged and supporting the movement that the BHA has kind of put forth and supporting the vision. So it's
absolutely,
it's exciting to see.
And I think this is our biggest party that we've ever had east of the Mississippi.
Yeah,
and we're born in the West, but as you just described, like we're growing here in the East, and this is our biggest event yet. So I think people just wanted to be around it, and I think they've found their team and they want to be around their team.
Yeah,
and so this is a great way for all these people to kind of meet each other.
Yeah,
and if not. If they have, maybe it's reconnecting with people they've only seen like once or twice.
Right.
So
yeah, I know last night coming in early, my wife and I went back to our Airbnb. I'm a camp type. She's more of a glamp type, maybe.
You had to like say that online, like
Yeah,
like,
this podcast all about transparency, and we're not hiding anything here.
And I bet she doesn't listen to your podcast. Does
no, she has in the past. Actually, she listened to like a recent one, and she made a comment. She's like, "What do you mean by something like I didn't say battle axe, but it was maybe something as bad as that, right?" And she's like, "What did she mean by that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's just hunting talk, babe. Like, it's just what I say with the guys, So it went over like a Led Zeppelin, and it was not good. But I think before we get too far into this, you're well known, of course, in the space. But for anyone out there that's listening to this podcast and maybe got into this kind of new and doesn't have as much background on who you are and what you do, if you wouldn't mind, just give us the Cliff Notes version of that.
Yeah, so I'm very lucky. I grew up in Montana, 5th generation. My family was very involved in conservation. My dad was the first lawyer for the Elk Foundation when they started in 1985 until he passed away in 95. I would say that my father passing away is why I'm here today. Okay. Really, it created this huge hole, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for me to kind of follow in his footsteps a little bit. And so I got a wildlife biology degree at the University of Montana. Fresh out of school, was with the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership for a little bit, for 3.5 years, and then went to work for the National Wildlife Federation. And then 6 years ago, came over here to BHA. And BHA, as they started around a campfire, 2004. All good things happen around a campfire late at night. Can't wait for this big one we're going to have tonight.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But they looked at the playing field of all the sportsman's organizations that are out there, and nobody's really focused on public lands and public waters. Great work being done by the Elk Foundation, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever. But nobody's really focused on public lands, and so their idea was to make sure that we have access to public lands and waters, and then the fish and wildlife habitat when you get there. very simple. Now that starts all the way from a local level. Here in Pennsylvania, they're working on Sunday hunting right now, so that's like just more opportunity. Then there's things, you know, that we work on in Washington, D.C. as well. And so it's just, again, that base is always trying to make sure you have access to public lands and waters. And, you know, we could have access to a parking lot, but we don't want that, right? We want access to good quality habitat when we get there. So that's what we're working on.
Right. And just an important, I think, thing for folks out there to know, I guess, is that even though we are backcountry hunters and anglers, right, like the access isn't just for those folks, right? It's not just like there's benefits beyond just those of us who like to go afield or like to throw a line in a stream, right? It's like anyone out there, whether it's a bird watcher, whether it's a hiker, a camper, whatever the case is, like we're all kind of in this together. It would be nice if we could figure out ways that we could all start to share maybe a little bit more of the burden, if you will, or or pushing for the progress, you know, maybe. But I think that'll come as we continue to do events like this and people get involved. You know, I think it's just an exciting time.
I mean, I'd go further. I mean, I think you're exactly right that there's a lot of like this shared kind of experience, you know, whether that's like the solitude, the challenge, the adventure that you can go have on public lands. And so whether you're a mountain biker, a kayaker, a backcountry skier, I think we all share that. So there's that piece. But I would also say that, you know, the outdoor economy, which is $887 billion in this country, which is sustainable and something that we can grow, like that should mean something to every American. And then clean air and clean water, you know, clean air and clean water, like we all depend on that, right? And the majority of that comes from our public lands. And so to me, if you don't hunt or fish or utilize our public lands, like clean air and clean water still matter to you. And so I think that matters to all Americans. And so I think, you know, we're all trying to figure out ways to work more together, and I think, you know, there's some indication that that's working.
Right. Yeah. I think I think if you go to places that we take some of those things for granted, right? You know, coming from Pennsylvania, right? I've never had an issue with clean air, clean water where I grew up, right? Because I grew up in, you know, as we were talking before we hopped on the podcast, Pennsylvania. Bo's from PA as well, from rural PA. But when you think about places, you know, not to bring up a sore subject, but places like Flint, Michigan, right, comes to mind, right? It's like the basic, what we would consider to be things you should just naturally have, like almost like a God-given right, right? They don't have, right? And they're struggling with it. It's causing some serious health concerns, which then parlays into, you know, a healthcare system that's strapped and increasing costs there, which impacts Americans. So it's not just, I think all these things people fail somewhat whenever they look at it as an isolated, you know, episode or incident, right? There's downstream effects that all these things have.
No pun intended.
Right, exactly. That, you know, if people really understood what that meant for the downstream kind of, you know, impact, it does become an issue to them, because maybe they don't hunt, maybe they don't hike, maybe they don't care about fishing or whatever. That's fine, but like, do you care about these other ancillary things that are going to impact you, and not just you, but generations to come?
Absolutely.
You know? So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
yeah, and it's funny because so I grew up in the heart of the Pennsylvania wilds area, the Allegheny National Forest, everything. So I never realized, you know, how lucky I was to have that. I just could go out my door and hunt, you know, wherever. That's just
you had
how
a big
I grew
backyard.
up. Yeah,
a big backyard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when I moved away to the Pittsburgh area for a while, that's when I really appreciated it. When I couldn't just, I'm like, what do you mean I can't, you know, just hunt anywhere? You know, it was just, I was completely blinded by it until, you know, then I ended up moving back, and I just appreciated it so much more. And my normal career, you know, as an environmental and safety engineer, the environmental part, you know, I work in a factory, but it's all about the water regulation, what's going in there, doing sampling, that stuff, the air permitting, and just kind of, so I look at it all from a different point of view now than I did. And I think a lot more people are kind of with BHA kind of coming up, and a lot of other, you know, positive things that just able to relate to it a little bit more and just think of it in a different light. I guess it's out there a little bit more now than ever, and it's an awesome thing to see.
I think that thing you said about taking things for granted, like I think that's something that we all need to be like thinking about. And you know, like these 640 million acres that belongs to everybody. Like, if you don't know where that came from, and you don't know kind of like what's going on with that, like that apathy, like that is like going to be the demise of these public lands that are unique in the world. And so these public lands that, you know, it doesn't matter who your parents are, it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, doesn't matter how much money you made last year, like they belong to all of us. Like that piece, like that's the aspirational piece that we're trying to like preach, because that's only been around for about 140 years, you know? And so like it could go away. And like once that goes away, you very rarely get that back.
Right, and it's one of those things that I say, and I know that there's, I believe Canada has some public lands and so forth as well, but it's one of those things, if you look across the globe, that is very quintessentially almost American,
Totally.
right? That we have that, right? And it's one of those things. We have a lot of freedoms and privileges that we were willing to go to bat and fight for, right? And this seems to be kind of the forgotten one.
And it's again, I don't think there's anything more American than our public lands. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very democratic the way they're managed. I mean, everybody has a voice.
Yep.
Which sometimes, that's discouraging because maybe we don't get exactly what we want. But I think that's an important piece about it is that they're managed for multiple use, the majority of them. And that means not all uses all the time everywhere, right? And so there's like, I think people that manage our public lands, like it's one of the hardest jobs ever, right? Like you're trying to make everybody happy. That's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and then they're charged with managing all the dissenting opinions, right?
Absolutely.
And those dissenting opinions, just like in a court of law, makes whatever it is you come out with stronger, right? Because you've had the opportunity to hear all sides.
Absolutely.
I want to comment on something or just kind of follow up on something you had mentioned just about taking things for granted and stuff like that, because it feels like, and I wanted to get your perspective on this because you have a great bird's eye view with what you do, but the apathy seems like it's more significant in the East versus the West. Like whenever, like the friends that I have in the West, right, they seem much more in tune with what's going on in their public spaces, what's going on with their environment and stuff like that. It seems like on the East Coast, people just aren't quite as connected to it. And I don't know if you see that as well with like the BHA in terms of like numbers, what regions are growing the most and what types of actions, regions are taking or not taking, maybe might be a better way to put it. So just from your perspective, do you see that, and what do you kind of attribute that to if you do see it?
I don't know if I totally see that. I think that, and if there is that piece, I would say it in a couple of ways. I mean, you talked about the Allegheny here. Yeah. There's public lands all over the eastern part of the United States, but it's not as prevalent as it is in the West, right? And so it's not as everyday. You grew up, in Allegheny, so that's like, I think you're a little bit unique in that piece. But I think, so maybe there's that disconnect a little bit from public lands because there just isn't as much, out here in the East. But like the Pennsylvania chapter right now, it's growing like a weed. And like I made a bet with one of the chapter leaders at Rendezvous that, and he says that they're going to have the most membership by 2021.
Nice.
Now we've only bet a bottle of whiskey, so it's not like there's a huge problem.
And everyone's winning. On that,
exactly,
so
exactly.
Let's be fair.
But it's the ambition. I think again, like even if you didn't grow up right next to the Allegheny and it's in your backyard, like that 640 million acres belongs to everybody. And I think that public landowner shirt that's kind of a slogan that we use all the time. Once people figure that out, that apathy changes pretty quickly. But if you don't know that piece, I've traveled all over the country, and especially when I'm in airports, and you wear that T-shirt, and either you're getting high fives or somebody's like, "What does that mean?" Yeah. And it's this little short conversation. All of a sudden, it's like, and their mind is blown, right?
Yeah.
And to me, so it's about teaching. I think once you teach, and so maybe people out in the West, just because they're around it more, they know more about it. And then once you teach people that don't know anything about it, they're super excited and more engaged in it.
Yeah. It's funny. I wore that shirt to my grandparents' house one day. Yeah. And my grandpa, I think he's 85 years old. He goes, "Public landowner, what land do you own?" Wait, public. He's like trying to figure it out. He's thinking too deep into it. And I was explaining it, and it was funny. But so like you were saying how it's unique that I grew up in that area. I hosted a pint night there. I don't know, maybe 3 months ago now, and a lot of people showed up, but I was really surprised still, even in my hometown area, that weren't familiar with one BHA, and also just kind of like the threats that are out there for public lands and how lucky we are, because like I said, the taking for granted piece of it, and kind of to your point a little bit on that, I didn't realize that there was a gap like that, especially in it seemed like the middle-aged kind of generation with it. It was I guess the younger generation seems to be picking up on it a little bit more, where it seemed like around my father's age and stuff like that, like they just that's just what it was, and didn't think much more about it. Sure. That's not, I don't want to put a blanket statement out there, but for the majority, that's what it kind of seemed like. Right. So it's cool to be able to kind of put get that word out, and even through different things like pint nights, and everyone likes to drink beer and talk hunting, so might as well have a good purpose behind it.
Like you're building like a community, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think people are starving. It's like this internet world that we're living in. It's like it's kind of easy to communicate with likes and like a one little comment. Like conversations we're having right now, I think people are starving for it. And so when you have like a pint night, and yes, beer brings people together since they've had the first beer, right?
Yeah.
Like, but like
it's a little social lubrication.
exactly. But I think it's like people are wanting to have conversations, you know,
Yeah.
and this idea that we communicate by memes, you know, and stuff like that, like is ridiculous to me, you know. Like people want to talk, and so I think thank you for doing that for one, and then two, when you're at those things, like you're educating people, right? Like, and it's in a soft way, you know. You're not like this shall be that way. You're just having conversations, and then those conversations, you know, those fingers go out someplace else, and then hopefully they're talking to people when they get home.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the important part too is that people need to recognize that supporting conservation, you can do it in a multitude of ways, right? I wrote an article for a publication that was around the idea of using your natural abilities and like your God-given talents to support conservation. Because, you know, for example, it's like, you know, you pay your dues, maybe you're part of BHA and you pay your membership, you know, every year and stuff like that. And maybe you can't go into your pocket to give more, and that's okay.
Sure.
It's like there's a lot of other ways. Like if you're a forester or something like that, you can be helping, you know, your chapter do habitat reconstruction, rehabilitation.
Absolutely.
If you're a CPA, you can help your chapter by helping them with their books. Everyone needs like financial or legal help, right?
Yeah.
So it's like
hopefully not legal help.
Hopefully not legal help. Yeah, let's stay away from that. But in the event,
yeah. It's always good to have a lawyer to keep you out of trouble.
Right? Exactly. But there's a lot of different ways. Whether you start a business and you donate back, like through, you know, like the profits that you make or whatever,
Totally.
right? So there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I want to talk about, I think, your vision for BHA, because, you know, I want to get a sense of like, in your opinion, you know, a kind of a state of the union, like where are we at now, right? And then what is, you know, we've come very far in a short period of time, right?
Yeah.
And so what is our vision for the future? Like what do you see us kind of turning into?
Yeah, I'll give you kind of like the cliff notes of like where we're at right now. So we're at 37,000 members. I'll put that in perspective. 6 years ago, we were at 1,000 members. So that's been quite a growth.
Yeah.
To kind of the driving part of that is chapters. And so now we have state chapters in 45 states around the country. 2 Canadian provinces, 1 territory up in Yukon. And so that's where we're at there. Staff-wise, you know, 6 years ago, it was myself and a couple part-time staff. Now we have 30 full-time staff, and that the majority of those are chapter coordinators around the country to help build our chapters. So Chris Hennessy here in Pennsylvania, I mean, that's, I think where we have staff on the ground that can facilitate and encourage and then really connect like folks. We're growing like gangbusters right now. And so that's kind of like the state of where we are. I guess the last thing I would say is that when I first started, our funding really came from a couple foundations. Like about 90% of our funding was there, and that's a scary place to be. Now, like we're way more diverse in our funding. And so that's something I'll talk about like now as a piece, is that like the more diverse we get, doesn't matter what happens on the outside, we're going to be okay. And membership is a big piece of that. And, you know, the $25 or the $100 a year for sustaining or our life memberships, like all that is adding into a pot that is unrestricted money. And so we can use that for whatever we want. And that's, you know, keeping the lights on, it's getting staff out on the ground. And so when I look at our chapter coordinators and having 10, 11 of those right now, some of them have 6, 7 states that they're working in. And that's way too much, too much. I've done this kind of work, and I feel like probably 2 states is about right. If you only have 1 state, then there's nothing to like kind of compare it to. Plus, it's like, I think you get too focused on that piece, and then you can't learn things from other places. And so vision for me is really to have those chapter coordinators, 1 for every 2 states, 1 for every 2 Canadian provinces and territories. And so that way we have people on the ground that can really kind of build this army. Membership, you know, I said 37,000. You know, what's the future look like? I think, you know, we've been punching way above our weight for a long time. And so now that we have 37,000 members, we're like, you know, we're in that heavyweight class, but like, what's going to happen when we're at 100,000? You know, I mean, I'm super excited about that piece. And so, don't just grow members to, you know, for membership's sake. You know, there's that money piece, but it's really like those people being engaged and like being able to call, like show up and do events, do a cleanup, you know, do some repairing, like restoration. And so, super important to kind of continue to grow that piece, and then like that diversifying of money. You know, I think that. You know, working with our corporate partners and all that piece, like that just helps us be more sustainable. But what's the future look like? Man, I want us to be the go-to organization all over this country, all over the world when it comes to public lands and public waters. And so that when a decision is being made, that we're able to include the voices of the people on the ground. And that's really what our job is as staff, is to be a megaphone for those people.
Yeah, and like you said, the community aspect of it is where it's probably why it's growing, you know, so quickly, because everyone's so engaged, and it's not just a a membership that you pay every year because you think it's for a good cause. You know, it's people want to be involved in it, are just super pumped. Like the energy of this event is like, it's awesome. Like gets me pumped up, you know, and
that's all across the country, man. Like I went to Indiana where they got like 1-2% public land, and I was like, or no, it was Iowa, excuse me, and I was like, what, like, why are you guys? And they're just like fired up, man, and they want to grow what they already have right now. Yeah. But they also like they want to you know, be able to go into the West. They want to go into Pennsylvania and be able to, you know, check out their kingdom, as I like to call it, right? Right. But no, it's I think that vision really for me is us to be sustainable, and which, you know, means money. It means being able to facilitate folks on the ground. And then I think it's being the go-to organization when it comes to public lands and public water. Right.
I know we're a little short on time because I think you have an announcement that's coming up. But
is that what Chris came in here
with? Yeah, he gave us the 2-minute mark.
Yeah, I don't get my own life anymore. People tell me
so I want to tee this one up. You know, we could talk, you know, for hours with you, but want to be sensitive to your time. But I want you to kind of give us, you know, your thoughts on the significance of, you know, Muster in the Mountains as an event, first East Coast event of this size, and what it means in terms of supporting that long-term vision.
Man, I think the first thing I would say, and it's that community piece that we've been talking about, is bringing people together, you know? I mean, again, we've talked about where all these people are coming from, you know, and there's a ton of kids here, you know, and then there's, you know, Richard Kaysen, who's hosting this, who's kind of on the end, you know, he sees much less seasons, I think is the way Randy Newberg talks about it, like in his future. Yeah. Like he wants to pass on, and like when you see this, like in the womb of time, all these people that are here, like there's a hope that conservation is going to happen. So I would say that is the first piece. It's just this community piece is super exciting. Second piece is that, you know, we've got all these games that are going on. It's very interactive, you know, and so as we do more events, and our Rendezvous in particular, which is our, you know, big event that we do once a year, is how do we incorporate more hands-on stuff and getting people outside, you know? And like, again, like all these kids that are here, how we have stuff for them, to get them engaged. And like, I mean, because I always say this is that, you know, we're like these little cogs on the wheel right now, and we're doing as much as we can, like while we're on this earth. But somebody's gonna have to pick up this mantle when we're gone, and who is that gonna be? And I think, you know, there's a lot of folks are aging out, and there hasn't been an organization that's kind of like that next generation of leaders. And I think that's one of the things that we're providing. Right. And you know, that's why you want these kids to get engaged. I mean, I talked to some kids yesterday, 11 years old, and they did a 42-mile hike in the Bald Marshall Wilderness. Jeez. 11 years old. That's amazing. Backpack, no like horses, like no llamas helping them out. Like it's like, and so that's like that next generation. So I think this event in particular is bringing people together, and then that energy goes home. And those little roots, you know, from the tree. Maybe tentacles is not okay. Yeah, like it's an octopus. And I don't know what that is. Those roots go out, and so I think the significance of that just helps us grow even more out here in the East, and really, I think, get people engaged on issues that are out here, but also, you know, make sure that they know that 640 million acres, it belongs to all of them.
It belongs to all of us. Yeah.
It's such like, and going back on that community piece, it's funny. I was working at the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. I was working the Maven Optics booth, and people would come up and say they'd listen to the podcast or whatever. Yeah. And the guys from Maven said, they're like, 90% of the people that listen to your podcast have either a BHA shirt or one of mine on or something. It's like, we could see your demographic. Like, and I'm like, it's just, they're all like-minded, you know, people that are getting together. And now there's a kind of a place to be able to do that and be able to connect with them. And it's been super cool. Like we've only been here for, you know, a few hours here today. Maybe more time has passed than I thought, but just awesome hearing from people and stories. Yeah. And I always ask, you know, how'd you, you know, get involved with BHA, or what made you come here? Just kind of, I love hearing the interesting,
everyone's story, like their path. Totally. But want to be sensitive to your time before Chris comes over and wrestles the headsets off of us. But if you wouldn't mind, let folks out there that are listening know where they can find more information about BHA and how they can get involved.
Totally. So we have a very, I mean, I'm biased, but our website's awesome. It's backcountryhunters.org. Yep. It's not that we don't care about the anglers. That would have been really long though, like backcountryhuntersandanglers.org, but it's backcountryhunters.org.
Metadata, right?
Yeah, right. And then so that's like that'll give you. I mean, you can dive deep into BHA there, and look at all the stuff that we're doing. If a day-to-day, like Instagram is probably like the best thing to see like what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. And whether that's events that we're doing all across the country, whether that's an issue like the Land and Water Conservation Fund that you can take action on, I think Instagram is a great place. And then once you become a member, you know, you get connected to your local chapter, and so you'll get emails from them, and they'll tell you about events, they'll tell you about things going on in the state, things that are going on out in Washington D.C. And so I think like the best probably thing is to go check us out on our website, and then really start following us on social media. And then, you know, we're an open book, and if there's any ever questions, like, don't hesitate to ask. Like, there's nothing for us to hide, and I think that's refreshing a little bit.
Yeah.
That we call it like we see it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we're gonna let you get going.
Yeah, hey, I enjoyed this, and I'm sorry I was getting cut off. Like, it's been a good conversation.
We'll chat over beers later. It'll be cool.
What?
What? What are those? We don't do that. Appreciate your time, brother.
Thank you so much, man. It's been awesome.
Hey, awesome, Land.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah.
Land Tawney, everyone. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank Land for joining us, and of course, would like to thank all the BHA staff and volunteers for putting on a kick-ass event this past weekend. And maybe even more importantly, I'd like to say thank you to all of you out there for just being a kick-ass community to be part of. You know, super proud to be part of this, you know, hunting and angling family that we have. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do that for us. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, Obsession Bows, Ram Cap Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, and Dead Downwind. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
I ain't welcome anymore. And long time coming, if it all. It takes a special knowing to colorful. Demonstrate.